Are the things that I've been taught actually real? Do they actually matter?
All right, well, hello, Lifegate Church. It's me again, John Hunsberger, your pastor of marriage and parenting. And today, I brought with me Pastor Micah Eldridge, our co-lead pastor
Hey, everybody.
of Lifegate Church. I'm sure you're familiar with Pastor Micah. And so the question that I'm answering today comes from the parenting conference. Came in many different forms, but really, the question is, so my child is an adult now. They moved out of the house, and I'm worried about them. I'm worried because they stopped coming to church. I'm worried because they're living a lifestyle that isn't what I've taught them, I'm worried that what they're thinking about their faith isn't the same as what we hear at Lifegate. Yeah. And so I've asked Pastor Mike. I know he's had a heart for this. He's led young people for quite some time here at Lifegate Church. He still has influence in their lives, and just got back from the Q conference that talks about some of these things. So, Pastor Micah, how would you answer that question for our people?
Yeah. First of all, I'll say it's a great question, and as a parent, I can relate and say that even what I share right now may not solve the heartache that you're feeling, because that's very real. And I understand how scary that can feel to you, and how maybe even frustrating that can feel to you. And so I'm here to encourage you, and I believe maybe this perspective might help. One of the things that we often don't realize, but is actually it's some thinking that's been passed down for hundreds of years in the church, from church fathers, from church leaders, from pastors, is that really spiritual formation, and you could even say it this way, Christian maturity, tends to operate in three big phases. The first phase is construction. That's when we grow up in the church and we learn the basics of who Jesus is and how to have a relationship with him. But then there's the second phase, and this is really kind of the scary phase. It's called deconstruction. And deconstruction is when we get to a point in our faith journey where we begin to ask some big questions. Now, what you need to hear is that is normal, and God can handle it. We begin to wonder, does God really love me? Does God really answer my prayers? Are the things that I've been taught actually real? Do they actually matter? And that's actually an important part in our faith journey. But there's a third phase, and that's really where things get deep and get real, and where we begin to own our faith, and that's reconstruction. Where we, after asking those questions, we stay in a place of community and we begin to discover deeper truths behind what we were taught in the construction phase. And so reconstruction is actually an important part of Christian maturity, but in order to get to reconstruction, you have to go through deconstruction. So the question becomes, if I've got a kid who's currently experiencing deconstruction, what do I do? And just a couple encouragements I want to give you. The first is give them space to ask the big questions. It's okay to ask questions. God can handle it. And there's a depth in God that sometimes you've got to ask questions in order to discover. The second thing is continue to pray, and pray for deeper revelation, and pray for them to have a real understanding and encounter of who God is, who Jesus can be to them, and who the Holy Spirit is for them and for their life. And then the third thing I would say is stay connected to them. The primary thing the enemy wants to do, and what sometimes we want to do in the deconstruction phase, is to pull away. And when we begin to pull away from the church in deconstruction, when we begin to pull away from other believers in deconstruction, that's where we run the risk of never entering into reconstruction. Yeah. And what is torn down never gets built back up into maturity. And so encourage your kid to stay connected, and do your best to stay connected to them, even if that requires some hard conversations and having a lot of patience with them.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor Mike. And now, I know also that many of you are like, this is great, that's encouraging, but can you give me some kind of practical resources, anything you can do? And there are some things. And so in a minute, I'll ask if Pastor Micah has anything off that he'd like to offer. But if you remember a couple years ago, we did a God Hang-Ups series. We also did a Ask Me Anything series. These series are available to watch on our website. And so if you found this video, I know you can navigate our website, but it's www.discoverlifegate.com and messages. And you can go through and find some of these messages to answer some of these questions. I'd also recommend this is a great book by a man named Lee Strobel. It's called The Case for Christ. it can be great for you to help reconstruct your faith. You know, your Christ, God, Jesus is real. It takes faith to know that, but we can use our minds and see that as well. And sometimes for young people, that's what their argument can be, and maybe where they're at when they're deconstructing is, well, does this make sense? Is this true? What is the evidence that Jesus is real? And so these are a couple of good resources. Do you have any resources?
I'll throw a book out, and it's a little bit more complex than just the 3 phases I mentioned. It actually mentions 7 phases of our journey with Jesus, and it's called The Critical Journey by Robert Gulick. The Critical Journey. Just look that up on Amazon. It's a great explanation of how our life with Jesus matures and grows, and it really explains how we can minister to people who are in that deconstruction phase and when they're wrestling with the truths about God.
That's great. One last thought is agree to, like Pastor Micah said, if your child is in that deconstruction state and you are disappointed, remember relationship is so important.
Yeah.
And so you can suffer, you can talk with one of the pastors here, but please keep relationship with your child. They need you.
Yeah.
And we're going to do the same.
That's great.
Pastor Micah, thank you so much for your time. This is
here.
John Hunsberger and Pastor Micah, and we're signing off for now.